Today, you'll hear some things about Easter and some things about Passover. I want to be really clear that it's not because they're the same thing. Rather, Passover started on April 8th, so this is the closest Sunday we've got to it. And then Easter is today also. We can respect each holiday without mashing them together, and we'll do that today.
I'm really off key, so that's...
No, that's fine.
I can also snap it out from it.
The story of that song is basically each process of redemption along the way might have felt like it could have been enough for us. It's actually not enough for us. Dayenu is only the beginning of the story. It's certainly not the end of the story.
If people spend more time thinking about the lives of others who aren't just like them, Dayenu.
When women and girls have the ability to design their own futures, Dayenu.
If all human beings have health care as a right...
If indigenous communities have control over their own land.
If we can put an end to climate change.
When people can vote in free and fair elections.
If there is a world without violence.
If people have clean air to breathe.
If people of color are treated fairly and equitably.
If I didn't have to teach my daughter about sexual harassment and rape.
If no child ever has to go to bed hungry ever again, Dayenu.
That would be enough. And it really wouldn't be enough, but...
It's more like mazel tov, like, good job, let's keep going.
Dayenu. Dayenu. Join me, won't you?
Everybody, come on, come on, come on.
Dayenu, Dayenu, Dayenu.
A secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall and the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah, 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 Your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty and the moonlight overthrew ya. She tied you to her kitchen chair. She broke your throne and she cut your hair. And from your lips she drew
Hello! We're so glad you're watching with us today. My name is Reverend Teresa Soto, and I'm the lead minister at the First Unitarian Church of Oakland. We are a spiritually alive, radically inclusive, justice-centered religious community. Our faith and ethics bring us together to make agreements that we practice. We call it covenantal practice. If you're gay, lesbian, transgender, or queer, you are specifically welcome in our community. We're saving a seat for you. Well, I hope you'll enjoy today's service, especially around a couple of special days in this time.
We light this chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism. May it remind us of the divine spark in all of creation, the power of love to heal what is broken, and to be grateful for life's blessings each day.
We light this candle in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and work for the day in which Black lives are treated equitably with dignity and justice.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, 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 Spirit draw near.
Today, Reverend Sherry and I have a story for you called The End of Beavertown. Not so long ago, there was a place called Beavertown. Beavertown was a series of 3 or 4 ponds connected by lots of secret underwater tunnels and channels. As you might guess, the reason it was called Beavertown is because it was home to lots and lots of beavers.
Beavertown was old, really old. Beavers had been living in Beavertown for longer than anyone could remember. It was a great town with lots of big green trees for eating, fish for chasing, and underground dens to keep warm in winter and for raising baby beavers. There were birds and mountains and flowers and pretty much everything a beaver needs for a happy life. And there were even some humans around, a couple of farmers, a few houses, and an old man who sometimes used to fish in the beaver pond. Everyone got along for the most part.
But one morning, all the beavers woke up to find that the water in their ponds was draining away. This was just about as bad a thing as could happen in Beavertown.
Some of the bravest beavers volunteered to go exploring to see where all the water was going. They were gone for a whole day and a night, and when they came back, all the other beavers gathered around to hear what they had to say.
The returning beavers looked very sad and very scared. Their whiskers drooped with exhaustion. They told their beaver friends that they had traveled far, far away, farther than any beaver had ever gone. But just when they were about to give up and turn back, they had found the new farm.
This farm wasn't like the others that dotted the valley. It was huge, with big buildings, bright lights, and lots of noisy machines. Vast fields surrounded the farm, and gigantic metal pipes shot water over all the plants. Lots and lots of water. That was where all the water was going. It was being sucked up by the big metal pipes that led to the farm.
Now, all living things need water, but beavers need water even more than the rest of us. They live in it, get their food from it, and play in it. Without water, they will die. So you can imagine how upset all the beavers in Beavertown were that night. Some beavers were crying. Others were angry and wanted to try to chew through the metal pipes. Others just sat there, shocked and confused. The beaver children were scared too because they had never lived in a world without water. Many had never seen their parents so panicked.
Nobody slept that night. The next morning the sky was gray, and the beavers saw how dried out their beautiful town was getting. Some of the beavers started acting very strangely, walking around Beavertown saying things like, "Woe is us, the end is near," and "Prepare for the final hours, beavers, we are being punished." Nobody had ever heard such talk before, but to many beavers it seemed to make sense. How else to explain why their town was being destroyed? Maybe they deserved it.
More and more beavers started gathering around to listen. And before long, lots of beavers were shouting and crying. Some just sat down and waited for the world to end.
Old Grandmother Beaver, the oldest beaver in Beavertown, spent most of her days basking in the sun on a big old tree stump outside her den. Most beavers were a little scared of her because she was tough. She didn't talk much. When she did, she spoke her mind. One day, in the midst of what most of Beavertown thought was the end of the world, old Grandmother Beaver left her stump and walked right into a circle of beavers who were tearing at their whiskers and chanting, "The end is near." As she gazed at each beaver with her fierce old eyes, they fell silent one by one.
One beaver said shyly, "Welcome, Grandmother. Have you come to wait for the world to end?" She silenced him with a fierce stare and thumped her tail loudly on the ground.
"No, I am most certainly not here to wait for the world to end. I'm here to talk some sense into you silly beavers."
"But Grandmother, can't you see? All the water is gone. This is a sign that the end is here. We can't live without water."
"Oh, pish posh. Do you think we have never been without water before? Do you think we have never struggled and suffered?"
The beavers thought about this for a moment. One spoke up. "We have. I can remember the winter when the waters froze so hard, and many of us died." Another said, "I remember the times hunters came with guns and traps and killed us for our fur." Other beavers spoke of their puphoods, of going hungry, of being afraid and uncertain when they did not know how they would make it through. But they had. They had made it through because they loved one another. Their parents had not been willing to give up on life and hope while they were just helpless babies. They made it through because beavers have always stuck together and kept living as best they could, even when it seemed hopeless. Some of them had died, yes, and many had suffered, but Beavertown had lived on.
Listen to me, beavers, Grandmother boomed. The world has always been like this. The water comes and the water goes. Sometimes we grow fat, sometimes we go hungry. Terrible things happen, and we don't always understand why. And it can seem like the world is ending. But we have faced troubles before, and look, we are still here. I know it is scary for you, but we must keep going. Keep living. Keep trying. Old Grandmother Beaver looked slowly around the circle. We can't give up. So, who will volunteer to go find some new water? An undisturbed group of ponds, a private swamp.
The crowd was silent for a few seconds. Then, one small beaver dumped her tail on the ground and said, "I will go." And that's all it took. Soon, everybody was thumping and shouting and dancing around, chanting, "I will go.
I will go. I will go. That very night, 4 groups of beavers left Beavertown. One went north, one went south, and the other 2 went east and west. They were gone for 7 days and 7 nights. Meanwhile, the water in Beavertown dwindled to almost nothing. Everyone was very worried, but they held on to hope, did what they could, and took care of the pups. Finally, at dawn on the 7th day, a group of very tired beavers stumbled wearily into town and said, "We found it." Then they promptly fell asleep.
The beavers set off to their new home that very day. And there, they are still building dams and chewing bark and fishing and playing and living. Together, they learn that just because things look bad, it doesn't mean the end of the world.
For
Good morning. I hope everybody is well, staying home and working from home if you can. The sudden onset of this strange new world we live in is upsetting, and we can't help but wonder, what's next? What's it going to be like when it's over? Will we learn anything? Will we do anything different? It's Easter morning and it's Passover. Maybe we can learn something by looking back. Now I know some of you think these are nonsensical stories or stories that you've left behind. However, our friend the sower teaches us that these stories are instructive stories, not history stories. We can learn from them. So what do these stories have to teach us today? Although they seem to be different, I see similarities. I see the human condition as being in tension and conflict between the way of the world and the way of the Spirit. Now, the world teaches us to value power in all its forms. Money, political power, that it's okay to oppress someone if you can get a financial gain out of it. Truth doesn't matter. The Spirit-filled life takes the worldly world, the worldly viewpoint, and turns it upside down and inside out. The things that the world values, love, peace, compassion, these are the things that really matter. Now Moses led the Hebrews from worldly domination, being slaves in Egypt, that led them to a better life, a promised land, based not on worldly values, but on the way of the Spirit. 2,000 years ago, Rome was the most powerful country the Western world had ever seen. Caesar said that he wanted to be God, and Jesus said, "No, you're not." Well, we know what happened next. Rome took all the power that it had and brought it right down on Jesus, tortured him to death in public humiliation. And that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Something lived. We need a Moses today to lead us to our promised land. We need a Jesus to show us what that looks like, but we don't have one. We need to be our own Moses. We need to see glimpses of Jesus in each other. We, in community, need to create our promised land. Now, how do we do this? Well, we already know how to do this. Don't kill, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't be greedy. Keep the family unit together by not following our fleeting desires. And my favorite, honor the elders. Jesus gave us some instructions on how to live. Feed the hungry, give water to the thirsty, welcome the stranger, clothe the naked, take care of the sick, make sure the prisoner's needs, physical and spiritual, are taken care of. House the homeless. And he gave us a commandment to love one another. And our modern day prophet, Martin Luther King, gave us a new commandment. Judge people by not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. We all know what to do. When this pestilence passes over our house and we step outside into this new world, what will we do? Will we just slip back in the same old way of doing things? Or will we find that we have changed? Will we have the courage to build the world that we dream possible? I close with the words of Joseph Campbell, who said, "The kingdom of God is within us." Easter and Passover remind us that we have to let go in order to enter it. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Reverend Sherry. I'm thinking about how today is a special day. Let's chat about that a little bit.
Sure. Good morning, Pastor Teresa. Today is Easter Sunday, and on Wednesday, Passover started. Even though this year they're happening close together on the calendar, they are two different holidays, and it's respectful to understand them separately.
That makes sense. I usually think of Easter as remembering and a lesson. One Easter story is that Jesus was a teacher who taught people how to be kind and make the world a better place. He was so popular that government officials executed him because they were afraid Jesus would become more than a teacher and instead become the leader of the people. The people who followed Jesus were sad about Jesus' death, but they also learned a lesson about true love. Nothing can stop true love. When they went to look for Jesus at Jesus' tomb, it was empty. This made Jesus' followers think about a second chance. Even though their teacher and friend had been killed, they could continue to show love and make the world a better place. How do you describe Passover, Reverend Sherry?
Jews all over the world held Passover seders in their homes this week. It's a ritual meal and a retelling of the story of the liberation of the Jewish people from slavery. I've been thinking about how, even though getting free from slavery was great, the Jewish people still had to deal with a lot of uncertainty. Like the beavers from our story earlier, they didn't know where they were going to be able to create a new home. All of these stories have a lot of resonance for the time that we're living in right now. What do they speak to you about, Pastor Teresa?
Both of these stories remind me that even when things seem hard, all is not lost. We have brought our hearts. When I think of second chances or stories that haven't ended, I think of two things from nature. The first is called a wood frog. It looks like a regular frog, big eyes, jumping legs, and a skin pattern to help it blend into nature. It lives in cold places like Michigan and New York. In the wintertime, the wood frog freezes solid. Scientists say that it has no heartbeat when it is frozen. It has no brain activity. Some people might think that's the end of the story. But in the spring, when it gets warm again, the wood frog thaws and hops about its frog business. Amazing. The second example from nature is a seed for a flower called campion. Campion is a small white flower with a thin stem. The oldest campion seeds ever found were 10,000 years old. Usually people think that seeds have to be kind of fresh to sprout, but these campion seeds sprouted after all that time and all that space of nothing happening. Those seeds remind me that even though we usually like to rely on facts, sometimes possibilities aren't obvious and they will still happen.
Thank you. I've been thinking a lot about my ancestors who made it through hard times. My grandmother, for example, her father and brother died in the influenza epidemic in the early 1900s. She and her sister and their mother lived through some really hard times during the Great Depression. They had to rely on the kindness of family at first to bring them into their home to live, even though some of them were not people that my grandmother liked very much as a girl. Her mother had to do things she had never imagined possible, like owning her own business. She started a boarding house for them to be able to survive. My grandmother and her sister, my great aunt Izzy, had a deep faith that helped them through.
That's a wonderful story, Reverend Sherry. Thank you. Our whole society is living in a time of uncertainty, just as Jesus' disciples experienced after Jesus' death, and the Jewish people experienced after their liberation from the place where they had been enslaved. And also, the beavers in our imaginary story, as they didn't know where they would live. There will be struggles and second chances for all of us. What are some things that you imagine might be waking up right now, waiting for a chance to blossom?
I've been wondering if this is the thing that might help even more Americans understand how important universal health care would be for all of the American people. Maybe it will even help our society as a whole see something new about the common humanity that is the thread that runs through all the ways people are different from each other.
White feminist teacher Gloria Steinem put it this way: without leaps of imagination or dreaming, we lose the excitement of possibilities. Dreaming, after all, is a form of planning. She's reminding us that our dreams for this time really matter because we can turn our dreams into plans.
We're going to give you a few moments now for reflecting, either within yourself or with your families. During this time of great uncertainty, what might be waking up?
The giving link on the website brings you to this page. Click one-time donation and you get to this page. You roll to the bottom and you'll be able to put in the amount. You can also put a remark about your donation in the box on the right. Check the date and the amount on the bottom. And then you'll be able to click continue. That will take you to the payment page, credit or debit card, checking or savings. You can put your information and submit your gift. We now have 2 ways to give. You can give with your mobile phone app called Give Plus. Look for the Give Plus app. Link to full instructions follow, and the link will be below the video in the description. Look for an icon similar to this design. To find the instructions, type bit.ly/GivePlusInstructions in complete words in your browser bar. That's bit.ly/GivePlusInstructions. See, there it is. bit.ly/GivePlusInstructions. You can even print them out to follow along. If you need help, email the finance team at uuoakland.org. That's finance team at uuoakland.org. And many thanks to the finance team for their work in making this possible.
In these strange new times, there is an economic aspect. Some of us are doing fine. Others of us are finding new ways to go to work. Some of us have to go to work, and some of us are facing real economic difficulties. The church is being affected too. Rentals have stopped, but our expenses continue. As we pass the virtual offering basket this morning, I ask you to be generous. You can find the virtual offering basket on our church website, uuoakland.org. Please join our virtual hands together as we say together the words of our congregational commitment. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love, we call community, we dedicate ourselves, and these are offerings.
Everything is still on fire, despite your best efforts. In addition to living, it is clear that fire or not, you must level up in what it means to thrive. Right now, that means wrestling with the truth in the fact that everything is not all your fault. I am sorry that everything is still on fire. Once hate catches the winds of "not my problem" blow, and the blaze is hard to stop. But hard is not impossible. Not yet is different than never. You, in community, have an answer. You have a response to systems of power and control and to the cost of suffering. You and your community together are the answer. You are not only a people of flame, but also a people of cold, clear truth. You know both where you fall short and where you flourish, and where you still reach. Everything is still on fire, but all is not lost. You remain more nimble than steadfast, more unshakable than swayed by the latest rage. You are here to put out the ravenous flames and heal the world. Enough is enough.